everyone, this is teacher Janeth, and today's lesson is all about tag questions. Tag questions, or we also call it questions tag. Now, first, we're gonna have to go over the outline of this lesson. First, we're going to define what is the definition of tag question. The second would be what is the basic principle or the basic structure or pattern of a tag question or a tag statement. I'm going to provide also different examples and then how to actually say it because we're going to focus on speaking using tag questions. And then you will have to answer a worksheet attached to this particular interactive worksheet. Okay, so let's start. First, the definition. What is a tag question? So, a tag question is a statement followed by a mini question. So, in other words, there is a sentence and there is a mini question. So, a statement is basically a sentence. So, a sentence has a subject, a verb, and it has a complete thought, and followed by a mini question. When we say mini, it's basically short. So, our mini question is actually composed of two words. And then, of course, a question mark. We use tag question for confirmation. So basically, this is the purpose of tag question. Why do we use tag question? So it's actually for confirmation. Confirmation means you want to make sure that what you know or what you understand is correct. It has the same meaning as do you agree or right? So that's basically the purpose of tag question. Now let's go to the basic principle of tag question. So if you have a positive statement, so your tag question is negative. And if you have a negative statement, so you also use a positive tag question. Positive, negative. Negative, positive. So, what is a positive statement? So, a positive statement is not a negative statement. So, we know that something is negative if you're going to use not. So, in this case, you are a student. So, that is a positive statement. Now, what is a negative tag? You say, aren't you? Aren't you? Now, let's talk about the intonation, how to actually use our voice, and what do we actually mean as we go along. But in this case, you are a student, aren't you? So, aren't basically is are not. Now, if your statement is negative, it's going to be paired with a positive tag question. You are not a student, are you? You are not a student, are you? Now let's dive into the grammar rule in this particular statement. A positive statement plus a negative question tag. You is the subject, are is your verb, and then you have your complement and aren't you. Notice you don't say you aren't. And also notice that you don't say are not you. Again, you are a student, aren't you? You are a student, aren't you? So a subject pronoun, so this is your subject, right? And then it comes after an auxiliary or a form of the verb to be. So this is your be verb, and this is your subject pronoun. Aren't you? Now, in a question tag, you don't, or in a negative question tag, you don't say are not you, is not you, but you contract it. When we say contract, you use the apostrophe and then you omit O. You don't use N-O-T, but N apostrophe T. Aren't you? I hope that's clear. You're a student, aren't you? Now, if the statement is negative, so your question tag is positive. Mary isn't a teacher, is she? So is comes from is not and then she as your subject because Mary is a female, I suppose. So you don't say is Mary not, but you use the pronoun. A subject pronoun is used to replace the noun or noun phrase. Mary isn't a teacher, is she? But what if this is John? So John obviously is a male, right? It's a male name. So we say John isn't a teacher, is he? John isn't a teacher, is he? So positive statement, negative question tag. Negative statement, positive question tag. Now let's go over some examples. Okay, so positive sentence, negative tag, sorry. Negative sentence, positive tag. Example, your name is Pedro, isn't it? So your name is, so notice that the verb here is. So your question tag is, isn't it? Now teacher, where is it coming from? Now it refers to your name. Your name. So your name is a noun, right? And it's singular, but it's not a person. You don't say he or she, but your subject is name. So it's kind of like a thing. So it, isn't it? Isn't it? You live downstairs. So this is present simple. You live downstairs. Don't you? So live, if you're going to be more specific about it, you can say you do live downstairs. That's why you use don't you. Next, she studied. So this is in the past simple form. She studied biology. Didn't she? Didn't. Studied. She. You were joking, weren't you? Weren't you? You were joking, weren't you? Weren't. Were. You. You. I hope that's clear. Now next is present perfect. You've done this before, haven't you? You've done this before, haven't you? Now teacher, where did you get haven't? So this is basically you have done this before, haven't you? Next, past perfect. He had been in the war, hadn't he? Hadn't he? Notice you don't use had not been he, but you just say hadn't he? He had been in the war, hadn't he? You don't say hadn't been he. Next, you'll be okay, won't you? You'll be okay, won't you? Now where did you get won't you? So it comes from you'll. So you'll here is you will. You will. Now won't is a shortened form of will not. Will not. So that's why I told you earlier we don't say will not you, because tag questions are composed of two words. Two words. You'll be okay. You will be okay. Won't you? And then finally we have a modal verb. So modal, can, could, will, would. So in this case, we use can. She can speak English. So you say, can't she? Can't she? Now let's go to negative sentence plus positive tag question. She's never late. She is never late. Is she? So never is a negative statement. Never, not. Next, you don't live here, do you? So it comes from don't. Do you? They didn't know, did they? They didn't know, did they? Did, it's from didn't. They, it's from they as a subject. Next, you weren't joking, were you? So it's from weren't. You, it's from here. The subject, you. You haven't finished yet, have you? So have, haven't. They had never been there, had they? They had never been there, had they? Next, we won't arrive on time. Will we? So, won't, just like what I said earlier, it's the shortened form of will not. Now, take note, in a statement, you can use the full version. We will not arrive on time, or we won't arrive on time. Will we? Will we? But if you're going to use it in a negative tag statement, or a negative tag question rather, you don't say will we not, or will you not, or will not you. But it's always a shortened version. Don't forget that. So the tag question, the negative tag question, is always contracted. Notice won't, hadn't, haven't, weren't, didn't, don't, isn't, can't. Now finally, you shouldn't be here. So it's a short for you should not be here. You shouldn't be here. Should you? You shouldn't be here. Should you? Again, positive sentence, negative tag statement, or negative tag question, negative sentence, positive tag question. But take note that for a negative tag question, it's always two words. Isn't, don't, didn't, weren't, haven't, hadn't, won't, can't. Now let's talk about intonation. Now, teacher, how to actually say it properly, especially in conversation? Now, there are two ways. But first, what is an intonation? So, an intonation is the rise, this one, and fall, this one, of the voice in speaking. So, when do we use the rising intonation? So, you use the rising intonation if you are not sure. You're not sure and you want to know the answer. So, how do we say it? How do we use the rising intonation? Example: you're a student, aren't you? You are a student, aren't you? So, if you use the rising intonation, that means you're not sure if the person you're talking to is a student. That's why it's rising intonation. Again, you are a student, aren't you? You are a student, aren't you? Now, when do we use the falling intonation? The falling intonation. So the falling intonation is, we're going to use this downward arrow. Example: you're a student, aren't you? Aren't you? You are a student, aren't you? So notice I didn't say aren't you, but I said aren't you. What does that mean? So if the intonation of the question goes down, it means you are checking or confirming information that you are quite sure of. You're sure that the person you're talking to is a student. You have an idea already that the person you're talking to is a student. You're a student, aren't you? Notice the rising intonation. You're not sure. You are a student, aren't you? You are a student, aren't you? Falling intonation. You know that the person you're talking to is a student. So you say, you're a student, aren't you? You're a student, aren't you? You are a student, aren't you? You are a student, aren't you? So notice the difference. The first one, you're not sure. The second one, you're quite sure of the information that you know. Now, notice there was an example earlier. So let's just focus on explaining, okay, a little bit more about will. So will, if you transform it into a negative tag, we say will not or won't. Okay, so if you encounter won't, that's basically will not. But in a negative tag question, you are supposed to use only won't. Okay, remember that. You don't use will not you or will not she, but it's always won't. Won't. Now you can use will not or won't in a statement, but in a tag question, you say won't. Example: you will visit your grandma this vacation, won't you? You will visit your grandma this vacation, won't you? Or, you will not visit your grandma this vacation, will you? Or, you won't, will not, won't. You won't visit your grandma this vacation, will you? So take note, don't use will not you in a tag question, because a tag question is composed of only two words. Okay, so that's all for the discussion. Now you're going to answer the worksheet that I have prepared for you guys.